Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today is day 3 of my 14 Days of Love series. I'm Mary Knabe, and I welcome you to my Stampin' studio in Columbus, Ohio. On day 1, I showed 3 different ways to decorate Stampin' Up! Square pillow boxes. The third one, I actually used some of the hearts I embossed and die cut using the Adoring Hearts hybrid embossing folder. Then for day 2, I took the negative space left from die cutting those 9 hearts and made these 2 cards. And today on day 3, I'm going to be showing you 2 cards to make with the remaining 6 embossed and die cut hearts. All right, let's get started making our first card. I'm using a card base that measures 5.5 by 8.5 inches, and I've scored at 4 1/4 on the long side. Then you'll want to give that score line a nice crease with your bone folder. I've got a piece of 4-inch by 5 1/4 inch basic white cardstock. This will be for the inside of my card, but before I adhere it, I want to stamp a sentiment. And I'm using You Are Most Loved from the Adoring Hearts stamp set. I'm going to ink that up with real red ink. And I'm going to stamp that sentiment right in the center. And then I can adhere this to the inside of my card. The next thing I'm going to do is adhere my piece of Most Adored Designer Series paper to a piece of real red. The DSP measures 3.5 inches by 4 3/4. 3.5 inches by 4 3/4. My real red layer measures 3 3/4 by 5 inches. 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I'm going to just kind of center that there. And before I adhere these layers to the white layer, I want to wrap these layers with some gold and very vanilla satin ribbon. And I'm going to tie a bow. And I want that bow to be towards the right side of my layers, the right edge. Tie that bow. Well, let's see. It's being stubborn. There we go. And then just play with the loops and ends of your ribbon until you have the bow the size that you want it. And I think that looks good to me. So now I'm going to trim the edges or the ends of the ribbon at an angle. I like to trim them at an angle. For me, it just gives it a professional, somewhat fancy look to it, I guess. There we go. And I'm going to, and notice I can move this up or down. I can also slide this left or right. So I'm going to put it right about there. What I will tell you is if you have too much slack, in other words, it's hanging a little bit or you have excess ribbon, in the back, just pull the ribbon and then put a piece of Scotch tape over each side. So any excess ribbon would be in the middle. All right. And that will make the ribbon taut across the front. But I'm going to keep it right about there. And then I'm going to adhere these layers to the white cardstock with some of these Stampin' Dimensionals. I use dimensionals on nearly every card I make. It's a true staple in my craft room. I always have plenty. And my basic white cardstock measures 3 7/8 inches by 5 1/8 inch. 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. So the white border is going to be smaller than the red cardstock border. All right, I just have a small border of the white showing. See that? Now I'm ready to add this to my card front. And the last thing I'm going to do right now is add my 3 hearts. And I'm going to add 3 different ones. Now, when you use the Adoring Hearts Hybrid Embossing folder, you get 3 designs of the hearts. So I'm using one of each of the designs for each of the cards I'm making today. Since I'm working in 3s, I tend to add the top and bottom pieces first, and then it's real easy for me to center the middle heart between those for even spacing. I don't measure my spacing, I eyeball it, and that's something to help me. Do the top and bottom first, and then put the center one in the middle. And it's easy to kind of eyeball the space between the top and bottom ones with the edges of your layers. And then just put that middle one in the center. And that completes my first card. Quick and easy and so pretty. Wouldn't you agree? And it's got the sentiment on the inside of the card. We don't always have to have a sentiment on the outside of the card. So I'm going to set that aside. All right, let's get started making our second card today. Again, I'm using Real Red for my card base. It measures 5.5 by 8.5 inches. I've scored it 4 1/4 down the center of the long side, and I'm going to give that score line a nice crease. Next, I have 2 pieces of basic white cardstock. These measure 4 inches by 5 1/4. And one of them, I'm going to adhere to the inside of my card. The other one, I'm going to be doing some stamping on. But before I stamp the sentiment on here, I'm going to put my Most Adored Designer Series paper that measures 1 3/4 by 5 1/4 inches onto this piece of Real Red that measures 1 7/8 inches by 5 1/4. And I am going to be adhering this to this piece of basic white cardstock. I'm going to leave a little bit of the white cardstock showing below the layers. And then I have this larger layer area above the layers. This is where I'm going to stamp my sentiment. Now you can put your sentiment right in the center. You can do it on the left or to the right. I'm going to be stamping mine to the right, and I'm going to stamp it in Real Red. This sentiment is from the Adoring Hearts stamp set, and I'm using Real Red ink. I think that looks really good, exactly where I want it. So now I'm going to add my layers with some of my Stampin' Seal. You can also be using multi-purpose glue, whatever is your favorite adhesive. I'll put it just like that. And then I'm ready to add this layer to my card front. I made my first card in the vertical or portrait position, and this one is obviously in the horizontal, or what some will call the landscape position. I'm again going to use 3 different embossed and die cut hearts. They each have a different design. And I'm going to adhere these with a Stampin' Dimensional. For this size heart, you really just need 1 dimensional right in the center. And just like I did in my first card, I'm going to add the hearts on the ends first. And all I'm trying to do is kind of make them equidistant from the edges of the card. And that looks pretty good. So now that I have those into place, it's real easy for me to center the third heart in the middle. And I think that looks really good, all lined up nicely. Notice I did not measure or anything like that. Just eyeball it, kind of think about the space around the top and bottom, and then each side of the end ones, and then simply put that third one in the middle, and it will line up pretty easily for you. Now on the first card, I embellished that with ribbon. This I'm embellishing with some of the matte gold sequins from the pastel adhesive back sequins pack. 3 colors, they each come in 2 sizes. So I'm going to use 1 large one up here, and I'm going to use a small one near it, and then a small one, a small one in the opposite area of the sentiment. And there's my second completed card. Let me pull the first one back in here. So now we've completed the day 3 projects. Day 1 started with the 3 square pillow boxes, one of which I used 3 of the embossed die cut hearts that I got from die cutting with the hybrid embossing folder. I die cut 1 piece of 6x6 real red cardstock. So I used those 3 hearts, and the remaining 6 hearts I used on today's 2 cards. And in case you missed day 2, I'm going to show you those projects again. This is where I used the negative space left over from that die cutting that I did on day 1. And I just trimmed those down. You can get those measurements by looking at the day 2 video. So there they are. I hope you like these quick and easy cards. And I hope that you've enjoyed seeing the different ways I was able to use all parts of that 6x6 cardstock that I embossed and die cut with the Adoring Hearts hybrid embossing folder. I love that hybrid embossing folders can emboss and die cut at the same time. It's like magic. I hope you will tune in again and watch the rest of my series, 14 Days of Love, right here on Stampin' Piece with Mary Knabe, or even check it out on my website and blog at stampinpiece.com.